CM Punk versus Seth Rollins is official, as announced by Adam Pearce on this week's edition of WWE Raw. That match, highly anticipated one, will take place at the January 6th Raw on Netflix debut. It's going down then. So not wait until WrestleMania 41. Punk and Rollins in the ring, one-on-one on that show. We also got a tease for another match that could potentially be added to that show as well, and some other big storyline developments on this particular episode of Raw. Only had 3 matches on this show, but I was okay with it. I thought this was a really good edition of Raw. I thought, again, kind of pushing the rivalries and the feuds, really heating up in quite a few areas here on this show. Before we get into it, I keep telling you guys, hit that subscribe button, check out all the stuff we got here on Wrestling Reaction, daily WWE content, lots of fun stuff on the way as we head into WrestleMania 41 season, and got some retro content coming for you guys as well. So appreciate your support of the channel, and if you want to jump into the members section, I've got some members-only videos. We've already put a couple up over the past week or so. Check it out. Appreciate your support of Wrestling Reaction. All right, let's talk about Raw, because Seth Rollins, CM Punk, that's the story coming out of this. People were debating back and forth. Should this match take place on this show, or should they hold it off to WrestleMania 41? Well, you know my thoughts in that I was like, this match is obviously headed towards WrestleMania 41, right? Because, just the way they build it up, they wanted to do it at WrestleMania 40. It would all kind of tightly, tie together if you just put it at WrestleMania 41 and off we go. But I think what you can also look at here and understand is that, well, they really put this thing in motion a couple weeks ago. And knowing that, it was going to be really hard to hold off that first match for months, just based on the fact that, as we said, Raw's 2 hours now. It's about to expand back to 3 hours when they go to Netflix. And just, you need that content. You need the stuff to fill the weekly television once they get to Netflix. Sure, they're going to have a lot of potential options, because I think the Raw roster is going to be absolutely stacked coming out of this transfer window. But it would have been hard just to keep these two away from each other on the same show for months until you got to WrestleMania 41. So they've decided to go ahead and do this match now and do it on Netflix. And I mean, again, I understand why you want to go ahead and do it. It gives you a big selling point for that show, which has multiple big selling points now, right? You've got Punk versus Rollins. You've got Roman Reigns versus Solo Sikoa. Tribal Combat for the Ulafala. I think, again, there's another match that could be added to that show as well. We know John Cena is going to be there. We know, again, likely Cody Rhodes will be there. Roman Reigns will be there. The Rock potentially is going to be there as well. Lots of different stuff. So it's a huge show, and this is a match that, again, can kind of sell people on the idea of making sure they have no choice but to follow Raw from USA Network or wherever they're watching it to Netflix, right? And so I get it from that standpoint. Now, the question is, how do you do the match, right? Is this just, a 20-minute match where these two beat the hell out of each other and you get a decisive finish here? Potentially, if you want to do a multi-match series, that is an option. You could do that, and maybe, again, this is the trilogy, right? Punk just came off a trilogy. Maybe it's another trilogy with Seth Rollins this time. And somehow it ends. Could it end in a Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania 41? Could that be the same route they go, just like they did with Drew McIntyre? Possibility, right? Or could you have a match here that, yes, is hyped up as this huge must-see event on Netflix, and maybe there is no finish. Maybe you get an interference from a Drew McIntyre, who's already being connected here, as we see with Seth Rollins. You saw the tease backstage where McIntyre's walking up to Rollins, and you're kind of getting that hint. Okay, these two could actually be on the same page, potentially, although Rollins says, hold on a second. I like Sami Zayn. I like Jey Uso. I don't like you. And, that eventually led to McIntyre making the push towards Rollins in the back as Rollins was talking to Jackie Redmond. Zayn attacks him out of nowhere, and that is going to be a match it seems like we're going to get on next week's edition of Raw. As always, not going to spoil it. The spoilers are out there. If you want to check out what happened on next week's Raw, you can find it online. There are the spoilers. It was a double taping, to give them the holidays off next week. So you can find that there. But again, just to not give anything too much away, we know Drew McIntyre, Sami Zayn, things are unfinished between those two. And so now, could you eventually get to a tag team scenario where Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins are somehow teaming up potentially? There's a lot of ways you can go with this, right? Depending on the different matches they can get you from point A to point B. But we do know all the focus is going to be on this rivalry between Punk and Rollins. And I don't think we're just looking at, here's the match, we're done, we're off to the next thing after this. You guys know how it works with Triple H in this era. I think this is just the beginning of something much bigger for these two. And like I said, if that culminates in another Hell in a Cell match potentially at WrestleMania 41 between those two, I'd be all for it. But we'll see what happens, again, on January 6th on Netflix, because there's a lot of pieces that you can kind of tie into this. Because, again, I keep saying, it's all about how they're tying in everybody's history with the bloodline. And that's what I love about this, because, it's Drew McIntyre, it's Seth Rollins, right? Everybody is somehow tied back into Roman Reigns and the bloodline. The entire universe revolves around them. And that's okay, because, they are still the hottest thing out there in terms of the overall appeal. And so I think when you look at it from that standpoint, I like the way they're continuing to do this, right? Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens, all these guys have reasons to be frustrated and pissed off because of what their friends or former friends have done to align themselves with, again, the ultimate villain in Roman Reigns, who has just now decided to become a hero, and all of a sudden we're just supposed to forgive everything he ever did, right? And so I like the way they're pushing this, and that's one of the reasons why we're getting a CM Punk versus Seth Rollins match, and I do think it's one that will deliver, because I don't think you just do, a 2-minute match if you're hyping it up for the show, because then you're going to feel like you're taking it away from the fans. If you're going to hype this up and actually put it on that show, you've got to give them something of substance, I think. But will that be the end of it? I think far from it. I think this is just the start. And so knowing that, I'm okay with getting multiple matches between these two, because I think they are going to beat the hell out of each other, because there is that personal rivalry that, again, comes through on the screen, right? There is the history there, as we've talked about. So I like what they're doing with this, and, the pull-apart brawls. It's a staple on WWE television right now. I love the pull-apart brawls, because I'm like, why not? Like, make the people want to anticipate these guys getting in the ring together, and that's what they're doing in all these different scenarios, right? So I'm in. Count me in. CM Punk versus Seth Rollins, this feud should be fantastic. And speaking of that show, I mentioned they kind of seemingly are teasing another match that could be added to the mix, and it was because Rhea Ripley made it official that she is the number one contender for Liv Morgan's Women's World Heavyweight title. And now we're going to get that match again. Just as I kept telling you guys, it's going to happen. We just don't know when it's going to take place. And that's the match that I think is going to eventually blow this thing off between these two, because I just think it's time, right? It is time to now get sort of some decisive winner here in this feud between these two, which has been going on for quite a while now. And then we see what is going to be in store for both as we get to WrestleMania 41, right? And so I think you're going to get this one-on-one match. I think Rhea's going to beat Liv for the title, and then we see what's next for both of them. And if you want kind of my thoughts on what could potentially happen with Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania 41, I did share that in a 5 predictions for the WWE transfer window video that I did for members only, so you can check that out here on the channel if you want. But I did kind of go into some options potentially for Rhea on that, and how a Liv Morgan transfer to SmackDown, which, by the way, I did sort of make an argument for Liv transferring to SmackDown on that video. Now I'm not so sure. If you look at the kind of the promo stuff they put out about Liv, on Raw, like the Netflix Raw promo video that she did, and now, they're really pushing the Monday Night Morgan stuff. I don't think Liv's moving anymore, but I did, kind of say someone else could be moving, and I think it may actually make sense when we talk about something here in just a minute. But these two are going to face off again, whether it is Raw on Netflix, whether it's the January Saturday night's main event. That match is happening, I would think, before you get to the Royal Rumble, or maybe they decide to hold it off, right? But I think you've got to get a decisive winner here, and then we see, like I said, for the first time in many months, what are these two going to do without each other? And I think you have to find a way to keep them apart somehow after we get done with this match, because I just think it needs it right now to sort of get away from it. But, Rhea does still have kind of the history tied in with Dominic. And so is there something there? Are they going to finally do the Rhea versus Dominic match? Is that in the cards potentially? There's lots of ways you can go with this, but, no surprise that Rhea is going to be the number one contender, get another shot at Liv, and now we just see, they tease it right after the Saturday night's main event match with Io Sky, so we know we're getting to that, and now we just wait to see when they officially announce that match. And like I said, I would probably be stunned if Rhea does not win the championship from Liv in that spot, but we'll wait and see when we get there when it's officially announced. But that was really the story here, was just having another interaction between these two, and we are going to get that match whenever it's announced. All right, speaking of matches and kind of tying it into the Judgment Day, we have new tag team champions. No surprise, I think, as it is the War Raiders beating Finn Balor and JD McDonough. We made a lot about that tag team title reign of theirs. Not many title defenses in months, but this was the time, I think, to swap the titles. And you can say, well, are the War Raiders really built up to the point yet to where, they're going to kind of carry the flag for the WWE Tag Team division? Maybe not, but this was something that was needed, I think, in terms of just now giving you a little bit of something different. Because, like I said, the tag team titles, the World Heavyweight Tag Team Championships, had just not been a huge priority. Like, there's no other way to put it. There's just no question. I mean, they were not a huge priority. Now, I think you put the titles on the War Raiders, and I thought they did a good job with, like, the video packages here, right? Where you had them kind of pushing that both Eric and Ivar had come back from really brutal injuries, and their ability to kind of make this road all the way back now to a tag team championship opportunity, that was huge for them. And they've kind of overcome the past stuff with whether it's kind of bad creative and all this other stuff. Now they're finally here with a big opportunity, and they took advantage of it. They got the win. The crowd, I thought, a great reaction to them winning the titles. And now, like I said, I think what is good about this is you've got a team like the New Day that's out there where they can get back into stuff with it. Remember when those two teams were doing, what was it, some kind of, I don't remember exactly what it was. Weren't they doing like basketball stuff or some sort of wild vignettes? That was many years ago. But I think we're going to get a little bit more serious between these two now. But I do like the idea, of having the New Day now maybe trying to go for the championships. And you've got the War Raiders as the champion. You've got, you're going to get some other teams that get moved around in this whole transfer window thing. But I think this was needed. And now it does allow Finn Balor, JD McDonough, maybe on their own. We'll see how the Judgment Day goes in terms of, is that split official during this transfer window maybe? They've been teasing the leadership thing with Balor and all this other stuff. Does Liv and Dominic and Raquel kind of break away from everybody else? How does that work? But I don't think it's the worst idea to get Finn Balor and Judgment Day onto maybe SmackDown in a transfer window scenario. If the Bloodline comes over to Raw, I think that's something that could be considered here to give them a fresh start. Or, too, you've still got the Damian Priest thing, right? Because Damian Priest was one of the reasons why the War Raiders won the titles. So you're going to get a blow-off match between Priest and Balor, too. So we talked about the Rhea and Liv thing, Priest and Balor. I just think, I keep saying, these are entities that eventually are going to have to break away from each other and kind of, go their different ways now into something different in 2025. And I think the transfer window is a way to do that. But we'll see. But I think for now, this was needed for the tag team division. It was needed for those titles. And we can see, kind of the fresh matches and different, rivalries you can get now with the War Raiders, which, like I mentioned, I think New Day eventually getting those belts has to be the end game here because I think with the heat they have right now, I'm not saying they're going to win them within the next month or anything, but I do think that's a big direction to get those titles on the New Day because that could be as big as anything based on the reaction that they're getting right now. So new tag team champions, Eric and Ivar, and we'll see what the plans are for them. Speaking of championships, Bron Breakker did retain against Ludwig Kaiser, a multi-commercial break match here, which, is good. And that's why I said we only had 3 matches on the show, but you had a pretty long match between these two, which I like. Give these guys don't force them into a window. Let them do their thing, right? And it was another tremendous match between these two. I just think the chemistry between Breakker and Kaiser is really good. And, Breakker winning was the right call. But I keep telling you guys, I'm still intrigued by what Kaiser's going to look like, starting in January 2025 to where he's at in December 2025. Because I think he is clearly, just like Breakker, one of those future stars that is kind of, you just can't deny at this point. Like, he has a lot of the things you need to be a top star in WWE. And, they're going to keep playing around with that Gunther, relationship and those kind of things, and maybe teasing some stuff with Kaiser in the World Heavyweight title. But for now, Breakker, being in a spot where he's still the champion and is just taking on all comers, I like that idea, right? Because this is the guy, he just doesn't back down from anyone. And I think, too, we talk about this transfer window. There are going to be a lot of different options for Bron Breakker as you potentially have some people move over from SmackDown. One in particular I did talk about on that members-only video that I mentioned with the 5 predictions for the transfer window. That is something that I think there is one person over there I'd like to see kind of immediately jump into something with Bron Breakker, but there are a lot of other options as well as you go through the roster. And remember, too, NXT is involved in this as well. So you can bring people up from NXT. You can have them kind of in that scenario on Raw and SmackDown. So you could get some fresh NXT talent who are in a position with Breakker here. So I think that's something that's exciting too. But, as we look at this moving forward, again, the Intercontinental Championship in a good spot. Do they potentially move Breakker to SmackDown? Possibly. But I don't hate the idea of keeping him on Netflix either. Just as kind of to let everybody see the greatness that is Bron Breakker. But we'll see what's up with with Kaiser and how that pairing with Ludwig or with Gunther kind of figures into his storyline here moving forward. But for now, Breakker wins, and another just great title defense, I thought, from Bron Breakker here, which, again, is no surprise, right? So, all right, quickly running through everything else on the show. You did get the mysterious tease where you had like the little, the red symbol and the mark going through it and all that. If you haven't seen a lot of the, kind of guesses on that, it seems like we talked about Penta coming from AEW. It seems like that may be something that's hinting at him potentially showing up on Raw here soon. Pentagon Jr. would be, again, he's going to be fantastic once he's added to this roster, and I think that may be kind of the teaser there if you're wondering, what is that big sort of, symbol that they have here and all this other stuff. People are guessing that maybe that's him here about to join, because we know he is on his way to WWE. Doesn't matter when they decide to put him there, and it was, matter what brand is it going to be, right? But it seems like that could be something that's in the works on that. You did have Zoe Stark advance in the Women's Intercontinental title tournament as well. She beat Raquel Rodriguez and Kaden Carter. And then you seemingly had Kairi Sane taken out in the back by Pure Fusion Collective, which could take her out of the tournament next week. If you want the spoilers on that, you can check it out, like I said, on Raw, and kind of what the development is with that particular one, if you want to find out what happened with all that. But we know that so far, Dakota Kai, Zoe Stark, and Lyra Valkyria advance, one more to advance, and then we get to the semifinals of that tournament. And then The Miz is going to take on Dexter Lumis next week, Karrion Kross and Final Testament continuing their thing with them as well. So, that's kind of where we are with that. But there you go, guys. There's some thoughts on this week's edition of WWE Raw. Like I said, very heavy on the storylines and the backstage brawls and all sorts of stuff. But it's good. You're heating up a lot of feuds here, heading into Royal Rumble season and all that. But like we said, before we get there, we got to get to the biggest Raw ever on January the 6th. And so that will make for a very fun show and more to be added to that show without a doubt. So, again, let me know your thoughts, as always, on this week's edition of Raw. Always appreciate you guys watching. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button as well. Give me your thoughts, predictions, anything you see with going forward here on this Raw brand. What do you think is going to happen between Punk and Rollins in that first match? What do you expect from Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan in another match between those two as well? And again, appreciate you watching as always, and let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE Raw.